Start. Mr. Deputy Chairman, sir, I would at the outset like to thank the honorable members who have taken part in this discussion for drawing the attention of this House to a very valuable report. The fact that he himself has contributed to this report does not in any way minimize the importance of this reference, because this report deals with a subject which is of very great importance. But because it has not any immediate sensational impact, there is sometimes a tendency for such reports to be overlooked, and from that point of view, Shri Bhargav certainly deserves the thanks of this House, and I think the thanks of my ministry for having drawn its pointed attention to this report. Sir, he has given the history of how the Vigyan Mandir scheme began. I do not want to go into very great detail of that, but the honorable members of this House will remember that the idea was originally mooted in 1953. There was only one institution established at that time. The main purpose was to bring about a scientific atmosphere in our villages. They are not so much service institutions, sir. Some of the remarks which were made today probably suffered from misunderstanding on that point, and one honorable member, a very distinguished member of this House, was surprised as to how a single officer could perform so many functions efficiently. Now, if these were services agencies engaged in soil analysis or analysis of health problems or applying actual remedial measures, this criticism would have been completely justified. But in fact, the Vigyan Mandirs are conceived primarily as centers for disseminating scientific knowledge and creating a scientific atmosphere in the villages, and that is why in each Vidya Mandir the four most important things are the library and laboratory attached to it, the reading room, the museum, and the science club. Through the laboratory, simple experiments can be performed partly for service purposes, but more in order to make villagers familiar with the techniques, science, and to make them realize how science can be of immediate value and significance in the personal life. For example, the Vigyan Mandir officer may not be in a position to give a solution of the problem of soil analysis, but he can show by experiment how diseases spread through parasites. Of course, this knowledge is becoming fairly widespread in the country now, but in spite of that, there are areas in the country where anything which is done to spread such knowledge could be valuable. Then the reading room with scientific literature is there. As yet, these rooms are not very well equipped because we have just begun, but there is not enough literature in the Indian languages to be of service to the villagers, and the various items of literature in English or in any other language which the villager does not know would not be of great use to him. The Science Museum has a dual purpose: on the one hand of making the people in the locality aware of what are the scientific potentialities of the various objects of interest from the scientific or other points of view for those particular localities, but there is also the other purpose that through those science museums a spirit of inquiry is inculcated in the young men. They make these collections and bring them to the museums, with the result that the museums are today the centers where cooperation in the building up of the museum gives both a sense of participation and also some preliminary training in the scientific methods of collection. Then there are the science clubs, which also have the same purpose on a larger scale by trying to bring the schools into the picture. The teachers and the pupils of the schools would be the nucleus of the science clubs, and through them gradually scientific knowledge and scientific attitude would prelocate among the older generation. There are the main purposes, and if we keep them in view, the Vigyan Mandirs are essentially centers for dissemination of knowledge and only secondarily service institutions. We have actually decided that wherever any health clinic is established or any soil analysis station is established by the ministry concerned, the Vigyan Mandirs will no longer perform these services but refer the people to the more developed institutions run by the respective ministries. It was in this way that the Vigyan Mandir schemes began, and as will be seen from this report itself, in the first 4 or 5 years the progress was not very adequate. There were only 18 Vigyan Mandirs when this ministry was formed in 1958. In 5 years only 18 had been established throughout India, and we therefore felt that we should try to have a larger number of Vigyan Mandirs. Ultimately the aim should be to have at least one for every district, but we realized that that could not be done during the plan period. Mr. Chairman, the subject matter of this bill is very interesting in the sense that it deals with certain institutions and institutional arrangements that have got a long history. In this country, there are many institutions, organizations, and religious endowments that were created as a result of the prevalence of the caste system and the organization of our community on a religious basis. These organizations and institutions were called upon to perform certain functions which we today associate with the welfare state. There was a time, sir, in the history of our nation when it was these religious organizations and institutions that undertook to discharge certain functions like imparting education to those who were not in a position either to pay for that education or were not in a position to go to the educational institutions for certain family reasons. In order that the bright young men and women could be helped in prosecuting their studies, it was found necessary that the religious organizations should step in by giving scholarships to the people belonging to a particular community or to a particular caste, and by helping the families of those persons who were thus engaged in educational pursuits during the period that they were so engaged. Similarly, when the poor families were not in a position to make two ends meet, the same religious endowments and other institutions and organizations stepped in to help these families. In this way, a large number of activities were undertaken by these charitable organizations and institutions at a time when the state was not prepared to undertake these responsibilities on its own shoulder. The question that now arises is whether we have reached a stage wherein it is possible for the step to step in and to undertake these very activities so that these religious organizations and institutions might not have to perform those functions connected therewith. Is also the question of whether the government should give its patronage to these organizations and institutions, or whether the government should allow these organizations and institutions to function on their own. The bill only deals with the second part of the question, but the determination of the issue depends to a very great extent on what we consider to be our answer to the first part also. It is now well known that we have adopted the principle of the welfare state and that we now look up to the stage to go to the help of the needy citizen in some of his needs that are so very urgent and important that the fulfillment of which is considered to be so necessary from the point of view not only of the welfare of the individual but of the stability of the community also. And it is on this principle that we expect the state to undertake and discharge these functions. Therefore, it is desirable that the religious institutions and organizations are discouraged as far as possible from undertaking these obligations because of the fact that the need of the citizen has nothing to do with the caste or the religion to which he belongs. His needs arise out of the fact that he is a human being, that he is circumscribed by a certain situation and handicapped up to a point whereby it is not possible for him to satisfy his needs in the normal way, and therefore he looks up to the state to come to his help. Because of the fact that his needs arise from his being an individual and citizen of the country, it is desirable that his needs are satisfied in a manner whereby he is considered as a human being and a citizen of this country, and not as a person belonging to any particular caste or religion or religious organization. That is the reason why it is desirable that these religious organizations and institutions should be discouraged from discharging these functions functions, because as long as these institutions and organizations carry on these functions, the consciousness of belonging to a particular caste or to a particular community remains very much alive. If I belong to a particular caste or to a particular community, and if I have been helped by an organization belonging to that caste, it is but natural that if I am later on placed in such favorable circumstances, my gratitude demands that I in my turn help the people belonging to my own community and to my own caste. In this way, the consciousness of caste and community persists, which we have now begun to realize has done untold harm to our country. We want to see that this compartmentalization of our society into castes and communities should go. The consciousness of belonging to a particular caste or to a particular community should be replaced by the consciousness of belonging to the nation as a whole, so that the emotional integration of the nation could be speeded up. Because of this consciousness, it is also desirable that religious organizations and institutions should be discouraged from undertaking these functions. Full stop. Over.